Lakeland Public Television and area news partners are proud to present Debate Night 2012, a look at our area legislative candidates. And now, the Senate District 10 debate. Your moderator tonight is Ray Gildow.
Hello again, everyone, and welcome to our fourth and final evening of our debates for 2012. Tonight, our first debate is from 7 to 8, and it will be followed by an 8 to 9 and a 9 to 10 debate. So we'll be doing 3 in a row, and that will conclude the 2012 11 debate evenings that we're having here on Lakeland Public Television. This debate this evening is coming live from our Brainerd studio, and I'd like to take just a minute to introduce our two candidates this evening. Taylor Stevenson is the Democratic selection for this Senate District 10, and Carrie Ruud is the Republican candidate for Senate District 10. And I'd like to take just a moment to read the rules so everybody understands how we're going to operate this program this evening. The panel will ask questions after each candidate will have 3 minutes for an opening comment. And some of those will be their own questions, and some will be questions that they've received from the public. The candidates will rotate the order they speak, beginning with opening comments and finishing with closing comments. Each candidate gets 2 minutes to answer the questions, and each candidate will have a 1-minute rebuttal opportunity if they so choose. Questions will continue until we're about 50 minutes into the program, and then we will bring on the closing comments from both candidates. I'd like to also introduce our panel this evening. It's a little smaller than it was last night, but it's just as effective, I'm sure. Dennis Wyman is the Lakeland Public Television News Director, and he's here, and he's been through all of these, so he's a seasoned veteran tonight. And Scott Hall is the KAXE News Director, that's public radio in Grand Rapids, Minnesota. So welcome to both of you, and good luck. So we'll start the opening commentary, and we'll start with Mr. Stevenson.
Thank you. I grew up in this area. I went to church here. I went to school here. This is my hometown, and I have to tell you, there were many hard-working people who sacrificed and made my upbringing wonderful. It was a great experience. And I was very fortunate to take those opportunities and go out. I went to the East Coast for college. I got a great education there. But what I found is that as I came back home on breaks to see my family, to see my friends, the hometown that I grew up in was not getting better. The year after I graduated, we failed to pass a $5 million budget referendum for the schools, and as a result we ended up closing 2 elementary schools. We eliminated most of our athletics, and they're now privately subsidized, and we cut 100 teachers, a fifth of the workforce. And now, as a substitute teacher myself in the district, I know the impact of those cuts. I've seen the students, I've seen the classrooms. As a coach, I know what it's like to have half of the kids involved in your activities as when you were growing up. For me, this election is about coming home and being an advocate for my hometown. I see with our workforce how the impact of the economy has been. I've seen the fact that we've had double-digit unemployment here since I graduated. That's over half a decade. And that's simply unacceptable in this area. I've seen poverty. I've seen homelessness. I've seen the pain. I've seen the suffering. And I'll tell you, there are a lot of people hurting. They're walking down the streets every day, and they have lost hope. They don't see government as something to put faith in. They don't see elections as anything but bickering amongst people who just want to get into power. I decided to run because I want to change that. I want to be an advocate for my hometown. I want to be an advocate for the students that I see every day. I want to be an advocate for my players. I want to be an advocate for my family and my friends. This election needs to be about something more. It needs to be about transformative change. It needs to be about the students that we see, and it needs to be about our future. How we're going to do it. Not just saying that we're going to fix it. How are we going to do it? Applicable ways forward. And I thank Lakeland Public Television for allowing us to have this conversation. I thank them for allowing me to have that conversation with you at home and tell you why I will be the best advocate for you. Because I know this area. I know what it was. And when I walked down the street, I see the potential. I see the greatness of our citizens. I see the people who care about our community and need someone to stand up for them. And that's what I'm going to be. And that's why I'm going to ask you for your vote.
Thank you, Mr. Stevenson. We'll now go to the opening statement for Ms. Ruud.
Well, good evening, and thank you all for joining us tonight. I live in Pelican Township, and my husband and I have an independent real estate company. We've been in business for 20 years. I'm the former mayor of Breezy Point, and I served in the legislature as a senator from District 4 from 2002 to 2006. I'm pro-life, and I'm the co-author of the Minnesota Personal Protection Act. You know, our area has some of the highest unemployment rates in the state of Minnesota. And our businesses there are high business taxes, and the regulations are just crushing our communities. Quality education and unemployment go hand in hand. And I think just as we have overregulated our businesses, we're overregulating our teachers too, and we just need to allow them to teach. We have good quality teachers who are so talented, and we need to allow them to teach like they went to college to do, and they're talented. So my mom and dad are World War II veterans, and so veterans and military are very important to me, a high priority for me. My mom and dad are 97 and 96 years old, and so I'm a great consumer of senior services. I know how fragile that safety net is for them and how much we need to really ensure that they have a quality of life. My husband and I have 18 grandchildren and 2 great-grandchildren, and I think we're going to have 2 more great-grandchildren as Christmas presents this year. And we need to ensure their future and not enslave them to debt. I think I bring to this seat, this Senate seat, experience and leadership. You know, I've been here, I lived here quite a long time, and like I said, we've been in business for 20 years. And I think I have a strong work ethic, and I'd like to share with you some of my endorsements because I think they're pretty important and I'm pretty proud of them. I'm endorsed by the NRA and Conservation Minnesota and the Minnesota Chamber of Commerce and the NFIB, the National Federation of Independent Businesses, Minnesotans for Job and Economic Growth, the MCCL, and the Farm Bureau. Choice in Minnesota Healthcare, Care Providers of Minnesota, and Conservative Voices of Minnesota Women. And so I have a broad base of support throughout the state and throughout this district. So thank you very much for coming tonight. And one other thing, I have to say this to all my friends at the Golden Horizon Assisted Living and my mom and dad. I told them I'd give them a big wink and a hello. Thanks.
Thank you, Ms. Ruud. Our first question will be coming from Mr. Wyman, I'm sorry, and it will be directed towards Ms. Rudd.
Okay. Well, thank you very much. Tourism in your area, what a beautiful area you have. Crow Wing County, also Aiken County. Tourism, very important. And as a legislator in St. Paul, what would you do to support the tourism industry and the wonderful natural resources in your district?
Thanks, that's a great question. You know, when I was in the legislature before, I'm actually the co-author of the Minnesota Tourism Council. And we put that in place so that we would have people from all over the state of Minnesota that could give us their ideas and talk about tourism, not just in their own small areas, but all over the state. And so as we market the great state of Minnesota, we should remember that the great assets that we have, and to go down to the legislator and ensure, you know, we have to ensure that our environment's very important, and that we market to not just Minnesota, but we market to all of our areas around the state.
Thank you, Mr. Stevenson.
Well, I think that we need to be focusing on the ways that we interact with our environment. We need to also understand that the environment is key not only to just our tourism industry, but as well as our whole economic picture, and how we balance that economic development component that we desperately need here with our needs to preserve the environment for generations to come is going to be a key issue and a key priority for me when I get down to St. Paul. I think we need to look at an element of keeping promises here. And one promise that I've made is to expand our trails program and make them multi-purpose. There's a lot of space out there, and we can all share it, whether it be with walkers, bikers, or ATVs. And I think that that's one of the big differences between me and my opponent, is that I'm willing to make promises and keep them when I think they're in the best interest of the people here. Because I grew up four-wheeling. I enjoy being out in nature. I enjoy being on a bicycle. I enjoy walking. But I'm a northern Minnesota boy. I went hunting, I went fishing, and if we don't have clean water, if we don't keep our environment intact, we're not going to have those traditions. Now, my opponent might be endorsed by the NRA, but I have a very high ranking from the NRA, and I know exactly how to clean my 30-06, and I know how to use my over-under shotgun. You know, it's one of those things where that's what responsible gun ownership is about. That's what responsible recreation is about. It's about the ability to balance what it means to be a northern Minnesotan, keep our area attractive and safe, but also interact with nature in a way that is economically beneficial for all of us.
Ms. Ruud, would you like to make any rebuttals to that?
Oh, sure. I'm a big user of the environment, and as far as trails concerned, I've used trails for biking. I'm a great inline skater. I've gone over to the Cuyuna trails. They're fabulous, and I believe in multi-use trails. You know, just a couple weeks ago, I went out with the Cuyuna Lake Riders, and we went all over Aiken County on our ATVs. I know a lot. I have 2 ATVs, and I do use them. And so I do believe in multi-use trails. And I think it's important that we plan for the state of Minnesota, because we have horseback riding, we have bicycling, we have inline skating, and we have a multiple use for motorized uses too. So I truly believe in multiple use trails, and I think my record proves that.
Thank you, Mr. Stevenson.
Yeah, well, and Carrie, I'd have to respectfully disagree that your record proves that. I mean, it's essentially when you have the Senate file that you authored that took away a lot of rights, took away state land, put in place a ton of regulation on people who do use four-wheel recreational and off-highway vehicles. You know, I'm a member of the Cuyuna Lakes Riders. I'm a member of the ATV Association of Minnesota, and it's because I have those values. I have those rural Minnesota values, and I live them every day. I don't just talk about them and then do something else, which, you know, you in your last campaign had promised the Over the Hills gang that you were going to be a strong advocate for ATVs, and then turned around 2 years ago and wrote probably the biggest opposition bill to ATVs because you'd also made promises to the environmental lobby. And I think that doesn't show a balanced approach, which I advocate for.
All right, thank you. The next question will come from Mr. Hall, and it will be directed towards Mr. Stevenson.
Thanks, Ray. I got an email today from a viewer who said all week long in the debates, the main thing you've talked about in education is funding, and how the money the state borrowed from the school fund is going to be repaid. And she has said in her email, you haven't talked at all about what's happening in schools and the quality of the education that's being delivered in our schools. And then I was looking at your District 10. You have perhaps the biggest school district in northern Minnesota, in Brainerd. Then you have 4 very small school districts: McGregor, Hill City, Crosby, Ironton, and Pequot Lakes. And so the question is, what do you feel like is happening in K through 12 school classrooms, innovations? Also, how do you feel small school districts are doing? And anything you've seen in the Aiken and Crow Wing schools that you think need improvement?
Sure. Well, I think I bring a pretty unique perspective on this because I have been substituting. I've seen everything from preschool, every grade up, first, second, third, all the way to senior in high school, and then every part of the spectrum, whether it be special ed or advanced placement in the high school. I've seen, if there's a classroom, I've seen it. And as a product of the Brainerd High School, I do see that comparison between even a few years ago and where we are right now. And I'll tell you, when you walk into a kindergarten classroom and there are 27 to 28 kids, you're no longer teaching. You are basically trying to hold on to the classroom. And that's not fair. And there are wonderful teachers. I've had many of them. They're still teaching, but they are stressed to the max. They're not able to give that one-on-one individual attention. And I'll tell you, it's affecting our students. And it's not the high flyers necessarily, and it's not the people who are underperforming and disruptive in class and need that attention to benefit the others. It's the folks in the middle. It's the kids who are quietly having questions but don't feel comfortable raising their hand and can't get that one-on-one attention that they need. I think what we're seeing is we're having vital subjects that are cut. A lot of, right now our economic development piece, there are machinists in this area, both in Crosby and in Aiken and in Brainerd. They are looking for people with a skill requirement, and they simply can't find them because we've cut all of shop, essentially. We've cut woodworking, we've cut carpentry, we've cut technology classes in favor of more science requirements, which we need to have science and math, but we also need to understand that people who are not scientists and who aren't English majors need to have those skills classes to start to compete in our economy. And that's what I'd like to see. And yes, we do need to talk about budget. We do need to talk about repaying the $2.4 billion taken as a budget gimmick. We do need to talk about how people who have second homes up in this area don't pay into our residential levies. And we need to talk about the fact that the funding formula is fixed so that people in the metro get more than people in rural Minnesota, and that's a problem.
All right, thank you. Ms. Ruud.
Thank you. My opponent has got many flyers out there telling everyone how the money has been stolen. We've stolen the money. In the newspapers, he says we have stolen the money. And I haven't seen any indictments on anybody out there and anybody in jail for the stolen money. So I'd like to talk about that little piece. We have a school shift. The state had a $6 billion budget deficit, which they have turned around in 2 years to $1 million budget surplus. But the school shift money started back in 2007 to 2010 when the DFL was in the majority, and they shifted almost $2 billion of school funds and never paid it back. So when the Republicans started in 2010, there was a school shift then because they had the big budget deficit, but they only shifted $780 million. And in the 2 years, they have paid back all but $335 million, and that would have been paid back except for the governor's veto. They also provided $50 per pupil increased funding. So those schools that during the school shift would have to borrow would have money to pay for the interest for the borrowing. And those schools that didn't have to borrow, they would have a $50 increase in funding. And right now, because of the Republican majority, we have the highest funding of the per pupil funding ever. And so I think that's something that people should talk about. And also, when you shift the funds, it's not like they don't get any money. There's a percentage. And so 36% of the funds were shifted, not all of the funds. And it's been done for 20 of the last 25 years. So there's no stolen money at all. And I don't think that, and you hear my opponent cry and hew about this stolen money all the time, but I don't think that you see the school districts doing that because they actually came out better in their per pupil funding.
Thank you. Mr. Stevenson, would you like to do a rebuttal?
Absolutely. I very strongly disagree with that assessment, especially as someone who's been affected by it and sees the kids every day. I think that your assessment reflects something that's very out of touch with the way the education picture truly is. First, to say that you created a $1 billion surplus while leaving $2.4 billion in debt to the schools is just completely dishonest. You can't. If I were to say, well, I owe him $10, but I found $5 on the street, and so I have $5 more, is just wrong. And on top of that, to say that you increase $50 million in increased funds, that might be true, but it shows the continued trend of we have not kept up with inflation in the last 15 years in terms of funding schools at cost. And so to me, that's, again, a dishonest portrayal of what the education system is, and they have cried foul because they don't have the necessary funds. I think we need to look at the fact that this money was taken, and I don't care if it was by Democrats or Republicans. What it was by an ineffectual legislature that thought that taking money from our schools, which has cost many of our school districts, Brainerd, $20 million, Crosby, $4 million. It's cost our schools real dollars. To say that that was an effective and fiscally conservative way, fiscally responsible way to balance the budget is just wrong, regardless of party.
All right, thank you. Our next question will come from, Oh, did you get a rebuttal? We've done the rebuttal already.
No. Carrie has a response.
We haven't. No.
Oh, okay, I'm sorry.
No rebuttal. I did not say that it was a fiscal responsible thing to do. I'm telling you that we had a $6 billion budget deficit. And in order to solve that deficit, there was a school shift. But the school shift was, the biggest amount of the school shift was done from '07 to '10. And had the governor not vetoed the bill, the schools would have been paid back another $400 million, and that's a lot of money. And so, in the scheme of things, should the schools be paid back? Absolutely. It is our first priority. But we are $1 billion ahead, and we have filled the rainy day funds. And so I think as we move forward, the first priority is to pay back the school shift funds. Absolutely.
Thank you. Sorry about that. Okay, our next question is coming from Mr. Wyman, and it will be directed towards Ms. Ruud.
Okay, well, the economy is a concern. And some glimmers of hope out there, but when you look at unemployment, Minnesota sits at 5.9%. Brainerd is at 6.5%. How do you feel Minnesota can improve its business climate and create more jobs, specifically in your district?
Well, Minnesota has the highest business taxes. I think we rank 45th in the state as far as a business-friendly place to be and to do business in. And so we need to really say Minnesota's open for business. We need to lower taxes. We need to streamline regulations. We need to reform lawsuits that cripple our businesses. I'd like to challenge the cities also to look at their programs. If you look at the Initiative Foundation, they've done a study about the cities and who is doing the most fees and how much cost it is to build and to bring your businesses in. And cities in our District 10 have some of the highest rates for businesses to come here and develop. And so I would challenge our local cities to look at their fees, to look at what the cost of doing business, and to welcome businesses here instead of slamming the door on them and sending them off to North Dakota.
Thank you. Mr. Stevenson.
Well, I think the first thing we need to look at is, in our economic development picture, is education. When you have businesses that are already willing to hire and want to hire people in high skill, high demand, high paying jobs, we need to look at how we're going to fill the skills gap. In fact, our local economic development head at the Workforce Center says that's the #1 priority. If you want to build good workplaces and you want to build the economy, you have to start with education. And when you have a legislature in the last cycle, in the last 2 years, that's cut almost $1 billion of higher education funding, not only are you making tuition affordable, even at a local college like, for example, Central Lakes, you're also making it impossible for that college to provide the type of training opportunities they need to put people back into the workforce. So for me, we need to boost our education funding, especially our higher education funding. On top of that, we need to look at this in a more holistic way. It's great to use slogans like we need to make us more business friendly, but I don't know what that means. I don't know what the practical way of doing that is. What we need is we need to look at this, look at the whole piece of the puzzle, all the pieces of the puzzle. We need to look at the fact that we need to make Brainerd, Crosby, Aiken, they need to be places people want to live and develop a quality of life there, which means investing in sidewalks, very small things, bike lanes, giving people an extra mode of transportation so they can make choices. We need to talk about transportation in that way, how we're going to get to go places, and housing. Because right now we don't have enough affordable housing here. And if you don't have those pieces, talking about jobs and talking about lowering taxes on small businesses isn't going to do anything because people won't want to live here. And so if we focus on economic development in a more holistic way and look at actual applicable steps that we can take moving forward, that's the way we're going to grow jobs and grow our economy.
Thank you. Ms. Ruud.
Well, from what I hear, holistic approach must mean we need to raise every tax that we have here, because all of the things that my opponent has been talking about cost money and cost tax monies. And so if the holistic approach is to raise taxes on everyone else so that we can have the things that he thinks important, bike trails and sidewalks and things for our communities, I guess I would have to disagree with that approach.
Mr. Stevenson.
Well, I guess I disagree with that assessment, and by that same token, Carrie, you're talking about paying back our schools, and you're talking about making sure that we're keeping our social safety net, especially for seniors, intact. that costs money too. I mean, you're talking about over the next 10 years, the cost of healthcare is going to double unless we do something about it. And I don't know how you can address a revenue situation without talking about revenue. And so, yeah, we do need to look and have an honest discussion about the government services we desire and want to have provided to us and how we're going to pay for them. We need to figure out how the community is going to get together to work forward in that way. And I'm sure that I hope we have that discussion later on. But for me, a holistic approach means low-cost things. It means taking on or narrowing our streets so we don't have to pay quite as much for pavement and then putting that towards sidewalks. These things can pay for themselves if we just think about this in a more common sense way. And that's what I'm approaching, not just a slash and burn, cut taxes for everyone, cut business taxes, because we've done that for 30 years and it hasn't worked.
All right. Mr. Hall will have the next question, and it will be directed towards Mr. Stevenson.
Okay. Both of you said borrowing from the school fund to balance the state budget in recent years was not a fiscally responsible thing to do. So what would have been the fiscally responsible thing to do?
Well, I'll pick up right where I left off. The fiscally responsible thing to do is not to come to the table every time and say, well, I'm in the pocket of this lobbyist or I'm in the pocket of this special interest group, and say, well, we can't talk about these for budget. And we can't talk about any type of cuts in these specific areas, but we'll put the easy cuts on the table and we'll do what we can there. We need to have honest and hard discussions. We need to talk about what are our priorities, and we got to talk about what is demanded of government. We've got to ask ourselves, if we don't want to raise revenue, are we comfortable with the snowplow coming 4 days after it snows? Is that something we really want? Because if it is, if we want that type of really small government, then that's what we can provide. We need to be more efficient. And as legislators, I think that what we see is there's a lot of laziness that goes on. There's a lot of people who just think good enough is good enough, and I disagree. Especially from my hometown, it's not good enough. That's not working for us, and so we need to put everything on the table, and we do need to talk about revenue. We need to talk about the fact that in our state, we think it's okay for someone to make $300,000 a year and only pay 8% of their income in state and local taxes, while at the same time asking people who only make $30,000 a year to pay 12% of their income in state and local taxes. I'm not going to use any type of slogans like tax the rich, but we need to talk about a workable way forward. And certainly asking the least among us to pay more in percentage of taxes than the ones who are the best off doesn't seem like a Minnesotan way to go forward on this. And so honestly, if you have a politician tell you that you can get everything you want without any increase in revenue, they're just lying to you. They're just trying to get your vote. And that's not the campaign I'm going to run. I want to have an honest conversation, because I know Minnesotans will step up to the plate if they can reasonably expect that the money that they're investing in their community is going to be fiscally responsible, efficiently invested in what we need and what we're asking for.
All right, thank you. Ms. Ruud.
Thank you. I think that the responsible thing is to take the tax burden off of our businesses. The 30% statewide business tax needs to be repealed. I think that we need to, when we attract new businesses and we bring business in, we have new revenue because we broaden the base. We have more taxpayers. When we put people to work, they pay taxes. And so I think increasing our job that we have in Minnesota and bringing people in and businesses in, that's how we increase our revenue. Not by increasing taxes on people and taxing the rich. That's not how it's done. And so the responsible thing is to make sure that our businesses can do businesses, take away the regulations, take away the lawsuits, tort reform, and make sure that they are welcome to do business in the state of Minnesota. That's how we increase our revenue. We increase the base and increase the taxpayers.
Okay, Mr. Stevenson.
Well, you just heard an answer where, again, we talked about paying schools back $2.4 billion and no talk of revenue whatsoever, no talk of actual cuts that we can make to increase. What we heard was that if we just increase jobs, then it's going to pay for itself. And I don't see that as a reasonable way forward. Again, we've tried that for 30 years. In Minnesota, we haven't raised taxes a dime in 10 years. And the gap is getting wider. What I know, and Carrie, I would expect you as a business owner to know this, it's not about giving business owners more money. It's about giving them more business. And people spend money when they're well off, when they're doing well, when we have a strong middle class. And the only way you grow a strong middle class is by ensuring that people are well educated and go out into the workforce. And when you're taking money away from schools to pay business owners and give business owners more money without increasing the demand on their services, that's simply not an economically viable way to move forward. That's just, just moving papers around and doing magic tricks with your book. To me, we have to look at educating our workforce and finding new sources of revenue that are going to allow us to create the economy that we want.
Ms. Ruud, would you like to rebuttal?
Well, I'm going to rebut on something else, because at the beginning of this program, I did not get my rebuttal on an issue, and I'd like to go back to it, because I think we've kind of beat this one to death, because I know we don't agree on this issue at all. But I'd like to go back to the ATV issue, because I think Mr. Stevenson basically called me a liar here, and I really object to that. I've been sitting here thinking about it. I didn't get my rebuttal on this issue. The legislation that I put forward was almost 10 years ago, and I have to tell you that at that time the ATV issue was really horrible in the state of Minnesota. It's kind of like the snowmobiles when they first came to being. And so we put together some very good legislation for the ATVs and for the environment. And it was a very tough issue, and I think we did an excellent job, because right now, because of that legislation, you have trails all over and you have new ATV clubs, and you have the ability to make new trails. And so I think in 10 years, the legislation that we put forward has really brought this industry back to where it should be, and as a viable tourism piece. And so I'm very proud of the legislation that we put forth. And I didn't sell out to the ATV people or sell out to the environment. I worked on a really tough issue, and sometimes someone has to be the adult in the room and make things happen. And I showed great leadership on that issue. And I think the ATV group has come a long, long way in 10 years, and they are a very viable tourism industry right now, and stronger for what we did in 2002.
All right, thank you, Ms. Ruud. Our next question will come from Mr. Wyman, and it will be directed towards Ms. Ruud.
Okay, I don't remember us missing that rebuttal on that, and I just want to continue this discussion, make sure you guys clear the air on this topic. Anything more that you want to add on that topic? I want to make sure both of you have proper ability to respond to that. Ms. Ruud?
Well, I just think it's very important that people know that I am, I have Conservation Minnesota's endorsement, because I am a champion of the outdoors, and I do believe in multi-use trails. And I think that what we did for that legislation was incredible for the state of Minnesota, and it's brought this industry, really brought it forward. And so I think that sometimes you have to make the tough choice, and sometimes you have to show leadership, and I believe I did that.
Thank you. Mr. Stevenson.
Well, and I want to be clear, Carrie, I'm not the one calling you a liar. You didn't make the promises to me. You made them to the Over the Hills gang, you made them to the Kind Lakes Riders, you made them to the ATV Association, and they're the ones that have told me that they got lied to. They're the ones. I'm standing up for them, because they're the people who live here, and they're the people that are my constituents too. And to be fair, I don't see any reason why there's a conflict with any type of recreational use. I think, as I said before, that we have a lot of space out there, and there are a lot of people who can use it in a cooperative way. But to me, this is a situation where you have a group of people who felt like they got used, and I think it's something that needs to be brought up, especially when you're talking about your own integrity. It's a simple fact that you told the ATV groups, you told the friends that you had, that you weren't going to, you were going to be a champion for trails and a champion for ATVs, and you did exactly the opposite. That's not my opinion. That's what happened, and you might very well have written a good bill. I guess to me, it personally impacted me in a number of ways, but I'm not going to get into that, because that's just one person. This is a group of people who feel that you taking photo ops with them is just something that's not right.
Ms. Ruud, would you like to respond to that?
Well, I think Mr. Stevenson is really, he comes with hearsay promises from these people. I would like to know what promises that I did make in 2002 for those people, because I don't think that I promised them anything other than I would be fair and equitable to all the trail users. And we did that. And so I think that Mr. Stevenson coming here and saying he represents all the ATV riders and that I broke promises, I would like him to tell me what promises I broke. And I think it's really irresponsible to come and say that you represent a group and what was done 10 years ago and promises made when you weren't there. So I think it's just totally irresponsible of Mr. Stevenson to do this.
Mr. Stevenson, you have 1 minute rebuttal yet.
Sure. Well, you know, and I'll tell you exactly. There's a man by the name of Ken Irish who came up to me about 8 months ago and had worked on your campaign in 2002. And I'm not going to beat into this. This has become a pretty petty conversation, and that's not what my intention was. You know, I'm sure that there will be multiple opportunities for Carrie to point out my failings. I think, though, that you need to be honest about this, that there were ATV groups that came up. You told them you'd be a champion for trails, you'd be strong with them, you went out and did your rides and got your photo ops and used them in your literature, and that's fine. That's politics. But I'll tell you, when I go out and ride with these folks, it's something that I did while I was growing up. When they tell me that they're supporting me, not just because I'm a member and that I work with these groups, but because they feel like they were betrayed. That's something that at least bears passing mention. I don't know why we have to take 10 minutes talking about it. I don't think it makes you a bad person. I just think it means that you made a decision and that you disappointed a group of people. And I don't judge your character on that. It's simply a matter of fact. And that's where to me, that's my last point on this issue.
All right, thank you. We'll move on to the next question, and it will come from Mr. Hall, and it will be directed towards Mr. Stevenson.
Senate District 10, the major population centers in the Brainerd Lakes area, but it also includes the sparsely populated county, Aiken County. And I might be tooting Aiken County's horn a little here, but the housing collapse in 2008 and 9 really hammered our wood products industries hard, the paper and the big mills. But Aiken County over the last 20, 30 years has done some of the most innovative forestry management as well as developing small forest products industries there. I just wonder if you'd share what you know about that.
Sure. Well, there's a man by the name of Rick Nolan who's running for Congress, and he owns the sawmill and pallet, or he used to own, his son-in-law now owns the sawmill and palleting factory in Emily, and so he buys lumber all the time. And from what we've talked about when it comes to wood products, that to me goes right into what I was saying before about how we interact with our environment to keep our environment strong for our tourism industry while also being economically viable. And that's something that I'm really interested in. It's something that I've discussed at length with different heads of economic development, Region 5, a lot of the area economic development corporations. It's a key thing. I think a good example of this, too, is the Kennecott Mining Project over in Tamarack. I toured the facility, asked very thorough questions, and it's a ways off from being fully operational, even if it is going to be fully operational. But the environmental stewardship that they provide, while at the same time providing economic opportunity, I think is a model to go after. And so if we can find ways to make Aiken County more prosperous and allow for more jobs and keep the economy diverse, I think that's a way we're going to keep Aiken County, and by extension, this whole area, very economically vital.
Thank you. Mr. Ruud.
Well, thank you. You know, I've worked very hard on the forestry issue. I worked with the Grand Rapids Forestry Affairs Committee, and in turn we created the Bemidji Forestry Affairs Committee plus the Brainerd Forest Affairs Committee. And so I think this area really does a very, very good job with the forestry industry. When I sat on LCMR, we went on a tour of the Wealthwood Forest. It's a beautiful forest, and Aiken County does a tremendous job of managing that forest. And we watched while they took their machinery in there, and they selectively cut, and they made sure that they picked the trees that would make the best canopy. They picked the trees that would be environment and habitat trees. And so I think Aiken County does a really wonderful job with all of their forestry affairs and taking care of their forests and understanding that it's a renewable resource, and they treat it as such.
Thank you. Mr. Stevenson, you're suggesting you do not need a rebuttal on that issue? Okay. We'll go on to the next question from Mr. Wyman, and it'll be directed towards Ms. Ruud.
Well, our lakes are certainly a treasure here in the Brainerd area. I guess that's why they call it the Brainerd Lakes area. But the spread of aquatic invasive species is a big concern. It has started to touch some lakes in this area with zebra mussels now in Pelican and Gull Lake. Some have suggested the state should have a long-term dedicated source of funding to fight the spread of aquatic invasive species. Would you support that? And if not, how do you propose the state best fight this battle?
I'm not quite sure what you mean by a dedicated fund, and I'm not, I'm not for dedicated funds. I think that as we move forward, the more funds you dedicate towards different issues, the less ability you have to balance budgets down the road. I will tell you that I've worked very hard on the AIS issue. I've been working with the Gull Lake Association and WAPOA, and I visited all the lake associations this summer and working on, there's so many invasives right now. There's curly leaf pondweed, there's zebra mussels. Pelican Lake just found zebras, and they're just devastated. And we're working towards how do we resolve that issue. You know, in 2005, I carried one of the first bills for aquatic invasive species with Senator Jen Olson when they found invasive species down in Minnetonka. And we couldn't get anybody's attention then, but now we have everyone's attention. And it's an issue that really needs to be, it's a hard issue because it's property owners and everyone who uses the lake, and it's a great resource, and so we really need to take care of it. And so I think we're all struggling with this issue. I sit on the Asian Carp Task Force. That's another one that's coming right down our door. And so as we work towards solutions for these issues, we meet with our task force all over, and we're searching for answers with the DNR, and we have down in the University of Minnesota, we've just funded a new research program for the carp and for other invasives. So I think we're all working towards and trying to do the best we can for our lakes and environment, because it's a very tough issue to work on.
Thank you. Mr. Stevenson.
Well, I think right now we do have a dedicated fund for this. We passed the Legacy Fund in 2008, and it's one of those things where that money is dedicated to make sure that our environment is clean for our future generations. And so I think that that's a fund that needs to be looked at very strongly in this issue. And I think we're on the right track. In fact, I think this might be one of the issues where Carrie and I get together on it, because it is important. As somebody who grew up in the Brainerd Lakes area, I grew up fishing, and I know the areas. I know Lake Edward. I know Pelican Lake. I know Gull Lake. I know the lakes that we fish. And so to me, the fact that we've got the DNR on this and working hard, we need to follow their best management practices, and we need to support them as much as we can. I know that they've come under attack a lot in terms of their funding, and I think that we need to understand that these are professionals who are concerned with this. On top of that, I think we do need to exercise a measure of local control here. You do have very strong lakes associations in this area, and the lakes associations are the most tied to this area when it comes to protecting our lakes. And so if we can really focus on giving them support and allowing them to continue their efforts to combat aquatic invasive species on their own lakes, I think that we're going to get a good outcome.
Thank you. Ms. Ruud, any further comments?
No, I'm fine.
Okay. We'll go on to the next question from Mr. Hall, and that will be directed towards Mr. Stevenson.
Yeah, the Brainerd Lakes area, I think all of us in northern Minnesota who've been here quite a while know the Brainerd Lakes area has kind of been on the front lines of absorbing rapid development and growth of residential areas around the lakes. And Brainerd has perhaps the most evidence of what we think of in metro areas as sprawl, where Baxter has grown so fast north of Brainerd. And the core of the town of Brainerd is actually the business core as well as the residential core has kind of been overshadowed and diminished by this sprawl. And I just wonder what you think is a good way to manage the growth of and the pressure on not only the lakeshore but on the local governments to provide the services as this region is really sprawled.
Certainly. Well, thanks, Scott. I think this is a very difficult issue at the state level to work with, because so much of it is based on how cities decide how to zone. Baxter, for example, has decided to adopt a certain model of zoning that has lent itself to this type of sprawl. Brainerd, fortunately or unfortunately, is kind of fenced in by their city limits at this point and really can't go outward, and so then it falls to the county to do the zoning. And I think we need to just have a dialogue in that conversation. For me, it goes back to my own stance on economic development, is we do need to focus on what is essentially our central business district in Brainerd. We need to focus on infill. You look at, for example, a project like the Taco John's project, and I as much as anyone like some potato olays, but to make that something that is auto-centric is very hard for our area, because what it does is it means we can't walk places. And when you have to get in your car and drive to downtown, then it's just as easy to get in your car and drive to Walmart or Target. And so by focusing on making our area more walkable, more pedestrian friendly, by ensuring that people can bike places, that's going to help us create the type of traffic a downtown needs to become economically viable. On top of that, we shouldn't be giving tax subsidies to businesses from outside our area to come and transform our area in a way that doesn't follow a sustainable vision for this. And I think part of our issue is that our cities have had very limited vision on this. They've kind of adopted sort of, if there is no roadmap, any road will do type philosophy. And I think you need someone with strong vision who represents the area to come in and say, look, we need to look at this from a holistic approach. We need to say, how does Brainerd and Baxter and Crosby and the Cuyuna Lakes area and Aiken, how do things tie together? And if we have that type of leadership, we're going to be able to have a strong vision, and that's what I'm looking to provide and advocate for.
Thank you. Ms. Ruud.
Thank you. I think that Aiken County and Crow Wing County have really stepped up to the plate in the last few years to redo their shoreline ordinances. And I've seen a really change at it, especially in Crow Wing County, about how they do business. And I went through the process with my parents on their lake shore, and I was very well treated. And we had a dirt committee that we went to. That's an acronym, but it's basically a dirt committee where people sat, and we sat in the room and we talked about the problems that we had, how to solve them, what was the best way. And I really feel that the county is listening to us citizens right now and looking at the shoreline ordinances. And then we went before the county board, and we were listened to again. And so I found that Crow Wing County has really been stepping up to the plate on their shoreline ordinances and doing a very good job. And I know that Aiken County is working very hard too. During the floods, the recent floods in Aiken County, they did a really excellent job of taking care of their environment and their shoreline over there. And I know that they had to take some of their ordinances and put them on hold for a while until they figured out how they are going to repair all the shoreline and what they can do because there's so much devastation there. And so I think that Aiken and Crow Wing County are really doing an excellent job of trying to protect the environment and doing good shoreline resolutions, and I think they're doing a fine job.
Thank you, Mr. Stevenson.
Yeah, I guess I have to disagree slightly, and I like a lot of the work that Crow Wing County in particular is doing. But I think that when you look at a project like, say, Dondelingers, where they moved from in the city of Baxter, and they worked with the county to sprawl outward down 371, we're not moving in the right direction, and that's not the type of infill that we want to be providing to create a vital environmental district, central business district in, say, Brainerd. I think that we are doing a great job with shoreline, but as far as I understand the question, we need to understand that if we don't stop the sprawl, it's going to hit our lakes, and all the shoreline protection in the world isn't going to be able to stop that. And so how you actually invest is the key question, and to me, you have to be looking at multiple answers. For example, the question, why would anyone want to live in Brainerd? Why would you want to live in, say, Southeast Brainerd if you had the means to live out in Merrifield, or as Carrie does, in Pelican Township? Those are beautiful areas, and we don't provide any sort of economic incentive or tangible incentive in terms of being able to walk somewhere by living within the city limits of Brainerd. And so we need to look at housing, we need to look at transportation, we need to look at those things so that we can create a vital central business district.
All right, thank you. Ms. Ruud, any other comments regarding that topic? All right. That brings us to our last question. We are out of time, so we're going to give each candidate 2 minutes for closing comments. And we're going to start with Ms. Ruud.
Oh, okay. Thank you. Thank you for this spirited debate this evening. I think the differences are very clear. I bring experience and leadership to this position. I'm a small business owner. I've run organizations and I've started businesses, and I've had my name on both sides of the paycheck. I'm for lower taxes and regulations, personal and government accountability. Just plain common sense. I'm not here to play the blame game on anything. I just want to get the job done. I hope that you can support me in November, and I would appreciate your vote. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Ruud. Mr. Stevenson.
I think Carrie's exactly right, that there are obvious differences between us as candidates. And Carrie certainly has more experience than I do. She's lived a longer life. She's been able to have those experiences. I think what I have, though, is I have a vision. I think that I have specific plans to help us. And for all the experience that my opponent has, she hasn't been able to provide you with any type of concrete way of moving forward. There hasn't been one response she has where you can actually say, well, this is how we're going to do that. That's what I want to do. I want to tell you about the small things, about sidewalks, about infill. I want to talk to you about how we're doing in our schools. And that's the conversation that I've hoped to have with you tonight, that I hope we have had. And I think that by looking at our schools as the key, as the silver bullet, you might say, to our economic problems, and really investing in our people, really investing in economic development, really investing in our environment and how we can balance that with developmental needs. I think it needs someone with vision. I think it needs someone with courage. And I think it needs someone who has some new ideas, who doesn't just use the same platitudes that have been regurgitated over and over, and that has made us all frustrated in how politics delivers its service. I want to be an advocate for you. I want to be someone who is from here and who believes in here and believes in the power of the people that are here and what we can do when we come together. And so I'll listen to both sides. I'll listen to all sides. I'll find the best experts to tell me what we need, because no one needs a know-it-all candidate or a know-it-all legislator. What I want most of all is I want your vote. I want your support, because I want to support this area. It's what I came back here to do, and it's a job that I intend to get done. I hope you'll give me that opportunity, and I hope that you'll give me your vote this November. Thank you.
Thank you to both candidates. From Lakeland Public Television, we greatly appreciate your taking time out of your busy schedules to join us this evening and share your views, and wish you the very best. And thank you also for staying within our guidelines and keeping everything on time. Appreciate that very much.
Thank you so much.
Our next debate will start in about 7 minutes or 8 minutes, and it will be the House District 10A between John Ward and Chris Kellett. So we invite you to stay tuned. We'll be back in about 7 or 8 minutes. So long until then.
Programming on Lakeland Public Television is brought to you in part by Nelson Law Office on Maple Street in Brainerd, specializing in estate planning, probate, wills, elder law, and real estate law, dedicated to professional service since 1980. Bemidji First City of Art Studio Cruise, a self-guided tour of over 20 area artists in their working studios, October 19th through the 21st. Information at visitbemidji.com. And the members of Lakeland Public Television. Thank you. Saturday night at 9, right here on Lakeland Public Television.
Next time on Call the Midwife.
Camilla Fortescue Chumley Brown? Yes.
Miss, people like you are supposed to help people like me.
It would seem, Betty, as though your baby is presenting in the breech position.
Sunday night at 7 on Lakeland Public Television.
After years in a Russian forest, one man emerged with rare footage of wild Siberian tigers. Now, biologist Chris Morgan is taking his own Tiger Odyssey with this remarkable man as his guide.
Oh, what is that? You're not going to believe
Be
this.
sure to join us Wednesday night at 7 here on Lakeland Public Television. The community calendar is sponsored by E.L. Mink Jewelers in downtown Brainerd. E.L. Mink Jewelers, a full-service jewelry store offering an extensive selection of diamonds. Lakeland Public Television will have a board of directors meeting at Bemidji State University in Bangsburg Hall, room 303, and at Lakeland's Brainerd office at 422 Northwest 3rd Street on October 17th at 4. This meeting is open to the public. Bethel Lutheran Church in Bemidji will have a bazaar tomorrow from 8 to 2. The Region 2 Arts Council has no-risk workshop funding available on an ongoing basis. If you'd like some more information or to request a workshop application, call 800-275-5447. Sanford Bemidji Medical Center's 5th annual Walk to Remember will be in the East Lobby tomorrow, beginning with registration at 9 a.m. For more information, visit sanfordhealth.org. First Lutheran Church will have Taste of the Seasons tomorrow from 10 to 2. The cost is $9. Friday night at 11:30 on Lakeland Public Television. Is there something big happening in your town? Send us your video and you can see it on Lakeland News at 10. In an effort to reach all areas of our large viewing area, Lakeland News is asking for your help. If you have any news, weather, or sports video that you think is newsworthy, please send it our way. We'll take a look at it and it could air on Lakeland News at 10. Just log on to our website and under the Lakeland News menu, click Send Us Your Video. Then follow the instructions on the screen. Feel free to call our newsroom if you're interested in contributing on a regular basis. Lakeland News at 10, the only 30-minute nightly newscast for North Central Minnesota.
Now Out of the Hat is a 24-hour production. Location of your play.
Roadside tourist trap gift shop.
They have 12 hours to put it all together. Lights, sound, costumes, props.
Season premieres Thursday, October 18th at 7 p.m.
Lakeland Public Television is governed and controlled by a local board of directors. This board of directors is made up of a cross-section of citizens from our viewing area. Also, Lakeland Public Television has a community advisory council that advises the station on programming and how well the station is meeting the expectations of the public it serves. Meetings of both the board of directors and the CAC are open to the public. Information about these open meetings, including times, dates, and locations, can be found on our website, lptv.org, in the governance section. You can also call 800-292-0922 for more information regarding LPTV's board and the CAC meetings.
Hi, I'm Jim Hanko, and I'm the chairman of the board of Lakeland Public Television. I'd like to encourage you to support Lakeland's Building for the Future capital campaign. As a volunteer board member, I can assure you the need is real, and the project will benefit the entire region for many years to come. Please go to lptv.org and click on Building for the Future to learn more about and support our campaign. Thank you.
Do you have a story to tell? Have you ever wanted to be a television producer? Lakeland Public Television wants to hear from you. If you have an idea for a program that you would like to produce, send us a 2-page description of your idea, your experience, and why we should lend you a digital camera and editing equipment. Watch Lakeland News, sponsored by Essentia Health. The new Baxter Clinic is now open with over 100 physicians and staff for your pediatric, OBGYN, family medicine, physical therapy, and pharmacy needs. EssentialHealth.org. Here with you. You're watching Lakeland Public Television, providing quality programming 24 hours a day. Programming on Lakeland Public Television is brought to you in part by Edgewood Vista